Hey, what's up, guys? Good evening. Welcome to the Hope Shot live events. And tonight we have our Addiction to Success series. If you guys are just joining us and don't know what the Hope Shot is about, we do our live videos every Wednesday night and Sunday night, 8 p.m. live right here on the Hope Shot to spread hope and inspiration about recovery from active addiction. So tonight, Ben is going to share his story with us, and we are excited to hear it. And I'm going to have Johnny go ahead and read the clarity statement. If you guys are jumping on as well, say hi. Let us know you're here.
And like and share.
Like and share. Yes, baby.
What's up, family? Okay, so the Hope Shot clarity statement. We here at the Hope Shot are a group of people in recovery spreading inspiration. We come from all different walks of life and pathways of recovery. Our verbiage may be different at times, but we all have one thing in common: recovery as a lifestyle. We support all pathways of recovery. It doesn't matter how you get from A to Z, just get there. Thank you for being a part of our family.
Thank you, Johnny.
Yes.
And Mike Lloyd, what's up, Mike Lloyd? Happy Thanksgiving to you, my friend. He says, Happy Thanksgiving, fam.
Yes.
All right. So, Johnny, I guess I'm going to give it over to you, and you start off introducing Ben for us, please.
Sure. All right. So, God, Ben, the way that I met Ben was, I think I was probably about 6 months sober at the time. I was working at a car wash. I was living at a halfway house, just getting back on my feet, and a friend of mine, actually, Mike, who just commented, said that a friend of his was looking to hire a guy, a maintenance guy, because Ben owns a gym. And so I went and applied for the job. I got the job, and I spent the next 4.5, almost 5 years working for Ben. And I'd like to say, man, in that time, I was a mess when I got with Ben and I got to Zone. I was just putting my life back together. I think I was 38 years old, and I had no idea who I was. I was just going with the flow. I just had made a decision that recovery was going to be my lifestyle, no matter what. At that point in my life, I'd never held a job for longer than 2 or 3 months. And I was petrified. And I tell this a lot in my story, I have before, my first day there, I thought I was getting hired as a janitor, and I had no idea I was getting hired as a director. And he said, here's your office, here's some keys and the alarm codes, here's some credit cards, and these are your employees. And I remember thinking, like, man, I'm either going to take this and run with it, or I'm going to burn my life down again. And I took it and ran with it, man. And in that time, Ben has taught me a lot of stuff, man. He's one of my best friends. He's a mentor to me. He's taught me about business. He's taught me about relationships and marriage with me and my wife. I love him to death. He gave me an opportunity, and we're still very close friends today. And I'm going to let you hear his story. So, Ben, let it rip.
Well, thanks, John. And thanks for having me on tonight. John's a miracle. I remember when he first walked in, he really couldn't even put a sentence together. And then to see him today it's just the promises in recovery. And it's awesome. Right when I got on with these guys, I shared a little bit something to just how recovery has worked in my life. And I'm going to get into my story. But today I had the police chief come to my business and just say hi and say, hey, thank you for what you do for this community and what you do for me. And as he walked away, I started to think, I was like, wow, this is unbelievable, because 15 years ago, I was running from the police. And now I have the police chief as my friend. And it's just what the promises of recovery. And it really is. It's unbelievable. But kind of how my story started. I was born in New York. My parents were divorced at the age of 3, and my mother moved away and moved to a little town called Denellen, Florida. If anyone knows where that is, it's in the middle of nowhere in the woods. My first childhood memory was being at a party with my mother and seeing her snort a white powder off a mirror. And I don't know, I probably was 3 years old at the time, not realizing what that was. But that's the first thing I remember as a child. I bounced around a lot. My mom was in active addiction, and she would take me to nightclubs. I would sometimes be left at parties, and the police would find me. And my mother would bounce from relationship to relationship. Sometimes she would meet halfway decent guys, and other times they were very abusive, and I would experience that. And my mother, I think I was about the age of 10 or 11, she met a guy, and she decided that they were going to get married and move away. And my grandfather intervened and said, listen, you can move away, but you're not going to take Ben with you. So my grandfather took me in, and my grandfather essentially raised me with my grandmother. And my grandfather was a retired New York City police officer. He was German, and he was very old school. And how my grandfather communicated was essentially through a series of cuss words. And you really did what you wanted him to do. Otherwise, he would throw a punch at you. But at the end of the day, my grandfather never had to take me in. And I look back on him doing that. And he's one of the most special people in my life. Growing up, I always wanted to hear the words, I love you, from my grandfather. He couldn't do it. He'd never had it in him. He couldn't. Anything I ever did would never meet his expectation. I remember one year trying in school and getting all A's and 1B and coming home with a report card and being so proud that I did it. And he said, why didn't you get all A's? And that's just how he was. And I remember thinking that, man, I really didn't care for my grandfather growing up. But looking back on my life, he really taught me a lot of valuable lessons about work ethic and really just being a man of your word and pushing hard. There were some bad things that I saw and picked up from him, but there was a lot of good. Growing up, seeing the addiction, I kind of told myself I never really wanted that for myself. Also, kind of one of the things I didn't mention is growing up, I was really small. I mean, when I talk about small, when I graduated high school, I was 115 pounds. And if the wind blew hard, I would fly away. But it was, I always liked girls, but girls didn't like me. I was a cute little guy. And then my 9th grade year, I hit like a growth spurt, and I came back, and all of a sudden all the girls had an interest in me. And I remember thinking, I'm going to abuse these girls, and not in a bad way, but I'm going to make them all like me and whatever, get those little shots of attention that we would strive for. But I remember that sticking with me, that, it wasn't good enough when I was the little kid, but when I grew up and I got some height to me, all of a sudden all these girls now were interested in me. And so going through high school, I never really drank until my senior year. And I remember going to a party, and at the party, everybody was drinking. So I drank. And I remember the first time I took a drink, it like filled this hole inside me. I really believe from the first time I drank, I was an alcoholic. I passed out that night. I woke up the next day and found out that one of my friends took my truck and wrecked my truck. And that's how my drinking career started. After high school, my grandfather was in law enforcement. He really wanted me to get into law enforcement. So I went to school for that. I graduated with an AA degree from CF and then went to FSU. I chose FSU as a school, not because it was great in law enforcement. It was because they had 7 girls to 1 guy. So I figured that was the best move for me, was to go to FSU because all the girls were there. And I started getting into heavy drugs. I was really getting into ecstasy. I was doing coke. I was doing pills. I was doing a substance called GHB, which is really popular in the weightlifting scene. But if you know anything about GHB, if you take too much of it, you will pass out. And in some instances, you just don't wake up, you die. But I became very much addicted to that. And I was up at school, and it was my senior year of getting my degree for law enforcement. I wanted to be in law enforcement, and I was walking home from a nightclub, and I passed out on the sidewalk, and I woke up to a cop shining a light in my face. And if you know anything about GHB, you come out of it and you're actually very coherent. So I'm telling him, listen, I'm not on anything. I'm good. Anyway, long story short, he searches me and he finds the GHB on me. So I get arrested. It's a felony charge. Me going to school for law enforcement was not going to work. Having a felony on my record. And I really thought everything was over at that point. At that time, I had to get a job. I started going to drug court. I got a job at a health club. And this health club hired a consulting company, and it was really something that I got to see how they fixed this gym that was failing, and I really liked it. And even though I was pretty messed up, getting high, I really was actually really good at it and found a passion for it. So the drug addiction continued to get worse, and I was dating a girl there, and I found out that she had been cheating on me. And one night she came home, and we talked about it, and I remember how bad it hurt me, because one of the things I struggle with too is just codependency. And I don't know if it's from my mother not being in my life, or I would latch on to girls and fall in love with them very easily. And so anyway, long story short, I remember wanting to hurt this girl, but also hurt myself. So I took a gallon of G and I swigged it. And if you know anything about G, you got to take it in a very small dose. Well, I knew that I took too much. And I looked at her and I said, listen, you got to get me to the hospital right away. I'm not going to make it from this. Well, they rushed me to the hospital. And when I get there, all I hear is people screaming my name, and I can just see a white light. And people are saying, Ben, don't leave. I could hear the doctors in the back, don't leave. And I remember just walking towards that white light. And then I turned around and I woke up out of it. I thought I was gone for seconds, and I was gone for 3 days. And come to find out that there was a machine essentially breathing for me, because I was not going to make it. And I know the doctors at that time told my parents, they said, you know, he's lucky to be alive. And at that point, things were so bad for me that my parents made a decision to pull me out of school and bring me home. And the addiction just followed me everywhere I went, right? Like, it didn't matter. If I moved to Ocala, if I moved to New York, it would always go with me. I think about some of the moments of how bad it really got for me. You know, I'll share a little bit more about the story, because I think it's important. At one point I moved to New York with my father, and I really didn't know my dad that well. And I moved up there with him, and, you know, had every opportunity to get sober, and I couldn't do it. You know, I'd stay dry for a while. And then eventually at one point I thought, well, I'm only a drug addict. I can drink, right? And then I'd pick up alcohol. And before long, I would be drinking alcohol all day long. It didn't matter. Eventually, it just would consume me. But again, the addiction, regardless of the addiction, I still could hold a job early in my addiction and still do very well with it. So I was running health clubs, and at one point I got a job with a guy that my dad knew in New York, running his gym for him. And I was doing really well and only kind of partying at night. And he said, listen, I have a gym down in Miami. Would you go down there and run it for me? And I thought, heck yeah, I'll go to Miami and run your gym for you. And I moved down to Miami, and that's really where it really hit a really low point for me. I remember moments, and I shared this with the guys when I first got on. You know, I had the felony, and I was able to get that expunged from my record, but there are so many moments in my story that I should have been arrested, and I should still be in jail today. You know, I think about the instances that if there wasn't a God, I wouldn't be here today. Just to give you an idea, when I talked about being friends with the police chief and before running from the police chief, there was one night I was leaving a party, and I had a gallon of GHB in my car, which is an unbelievable amount of GHB. I mean, you'd serve 10 years in prison if you're caught in it. So I leave this party, and I pass a cop car, and they turn around and turn the lights on. So all I know is that I got to outrun this cop, because if he catches me, I'm in jail. So I take off, and we're in a residential neighborhood, and I'm flying through this neighborhood. And I remember coming to almost a dead end where there's two houses, and there's a little bit of a passageway through that. So I run through this yard in my car, and it opens up to a set of power lines. Now I have a Lexus IS 300 is what I'm driving. And I take off down the power lines in this Lexus IS 300, and the cops did not give chase. And I made it home that night, and I remember going to sleep, and I woke up the next morning, and I thought it was a dream. I was like, man, what a crazy dream. Oh my gosh. And I walk outside, and I look at my car, and like all the ground effects are ripped off of it and everything from driving down the power lines. And I think back to those moments, and I think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened to me. On numerous occasions, I would be pulled over by cops, and they would let me go. And it's just a miracle, man. It really is. At my worst, I was not an employee that anybody would want to keep on. The guy that eventually gave me the job in Miami fired me. I was stealing from him. I was doing all kinds of horrible things. I deserved to be fired. And I remember living in a high-rise condo, and the addiction had gotten so bad. I had no money. I had a girl move in. She worked, and essentially I lived off of her, and she would give me money to get alcohol in the morning. And I would have to have the alcohol. Otherwise, I would go into a seizure. That's how bad the withdrawals were. So I would wake up in the morning and start drinking just to not have a seizure. And I remember one morning that my plan was I was going to drink enough alcohol and get up the courage and jump off a balcony. I lived like 15 floors up. And that was my best idea at that time. And I remember drinking it and then contemplating, and I hit my knees for some reason. I said, God, if there is a God, help me. Do something to show me that my life's worth it. And I started walking to the balcony, and my phone rang. And I had burned every bridge in my life. Nobody should be calling me at this point in my addiction. And my mother calls, and she says, something told me to call you. And she said, I don't know if you're ready to get help, but I'd be willing to help you get help. And I said, man, I'm willing. Obviously, this is my answer. So my mom wired me some money. Essentially, I loaded up my car and I drove to Ocala, Florida, and I checked into the centers. And that was in 2003. And I'd love to tell you it was an easy story. Like, I got in there, I think I was 23 at the time, but essentially in my mind, I think I was 15 and how I acted, right? I think wherever we started picking up. And I was a very immature little boy. And I got into this treatment center, and there was a lady, some of you will know, her name was Miss Sharon. And she was like a mother there, the mother of the treatment center. And she saw me one day and she goes, boy, you are so messed up. And she could see through me. She could see stuff that I couldn't see. And she was right. And I was so sick that while I was there in the first month, I was sneaking out of the windows and having girls pick me up out on the road. And I would go with them and spend time with them because I needed that attention. And then they would drop me back off at the treatment center. And the next day, after doing that a couple times, Miss Sharon calls me into her office and she goes, you got something to tell me? And I looked at her and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She said, Ben, you've been sneaking out at night. We know. And she just looked at me, and all of a sudden a tear comes down her face. And I knew something was like, wow. And she said, listen. I said, what, Miss Sharon? She goes, you know what the sad thing is? She goes, I'm looking at a dead man, and you don't realize it. You're going to die, Ben. And I remember thinking, man, she's right. She goes, I'm going to give you two options today. She goes, number one is you grab your stuff, get out of here, and I guarantee in the next month you'll be dead. She goes, there's no doubt in my mind. Option number two is we're going to go back to the group. You're going to, I'm going to tell them all that they're on shutdown for the next 7 days. They're not going to see their family. They're going to write. They're not going to get calls. And I'm going to tell them it's because of you. And then you're going to sit in a hot seat in the middle, and they're going to go around one by one and tell you what they think of you. And I thought, man, I'll just grab my bags and get out of here. But then I looked at her again and I realized like she was right. I wasn't going to make it. And so she walked me back over there and we did that. And one by one, we went around this room and these people told me how selfish I was, how immature I was, just all these things about me. And I think at that moment, I was humble enough to start receiving some of this. And I started taking my recovery a little bit more serious. And I stayed there for 6 months. And while I was there, you hear all these things about, listen, stay humble. When you get out, hit meetings. Surround yourself with people that have long-term recovery. Don't hang out with the newcomers because they're going to be just as sick as you and they're not going to be able to help you in any way. And I remember doing that for about 6 months and doing pretty good. And eventually started hanging out with a lot of newcomers, and we moved in together, and one by one, we all relapsed. And it's just like they say, it's crazy. These people that have this long-term sobriety, they know the way, they have the roadmap, and we still don't follow it, which is absolutely crazy. We think we know what's best for us, And like my sponsor always says, like, if you're up here thinking here, you're fucked. Like, you're literally fucked. You need somebody that understands, that's been down the path, that can help guide you. And unfortunately, I've had to take the rough road along the way. And I remember running again and going back to New York. And the only reason why I say this is because I think that this is, again, the miracle of recovery. And while I'm there, I relapse. And my dad calls me down and he says, "Hey, son, I want to talk to you." And he says, "Ben, I know you're drinking again." And he says, "I got something to share with you." He says, I have a drug problem too. And he says, "I'll tell you what, if you're willing to get help, I'll get help." And I was like, I had no idea my dad was doing anything. So I fly back to Florida. I get back into a treatment center. My dad starts going to meetings, and that's in 2005. And my dad's still sober today and one of my best friends. And it's amazing that I think about, like, that moment. It sucked that I had to go through that, but that was the thing that I think got my dad sober. And he's just an amazing man today, with just an awesome, just a great person. And I'm so proud of him. But so I come back, and this time was different. Like, I was humble. I was willing to listen, and anything that anyone told me I was going to do. Instead of going in the treatment center and looking for the first girl that will give me attention, I'm looking for people with long-term sobriety, and I'm wanting to find out how they're doing it. And I get out of this treatment center in 2005, and I have like 3 pairs of clothes to my name. And I think initially I had a bicycle. Eventually I got a car I was able to buy from my dad, but I was literally riding a bicycle to work initially. And I remember my sponsor saying, "Listen, Ben," he said, "I want to make you a deal." He said, "I want you to humor me." He said, I know that you think you want to get out. You need all this stuff back. He goes, I want to go through some things with you. He said, "I want you to write down everything that you would like in your life." I'm like, "I don't want to do that." He said, "Just do it." So I write it down, and he goes, "I got $80,000 in hospital debt from all my overdoses. I'd love to get my felony expunged off my record. I'd love to have a good job. I'd love to have a house. Man, if I could have a wife with kids, man, that'd be unbelievable." And he said, "Listen, I'm going to make you a deal." He said, "If you will stay sober for 5 years," he goes, "I promise you everything on this list will come true." And I just said, "There's no way." He said, "I promise you." So he said, "When you go back to work," he said, "you want to work in a gym?" He goes, "What I want you to do is, you can clean the gym, you can do some part-time stuff, but you're going to go to meetings and you're going to continue to work on your foundation, and you're going to stay humble." And that's what I did. I went to work at a gym. It was called Lord's Gym on 200, Lord's Gym, right? And while I'm there, I'm cleaning, I'm doing personal training. I'm not managing like I've done in the past. And I'm hitting meetings and I'm working it. And I believe that when you're doing the right thing, God puts this umbrella over you. And he starts to protect you. And you start to receive some really awesome blessings. See, one of the things that always would pull me back out, and I shared this earlier in my story, is I always needed attention from girls. And it was like those little shots, and it would never fill me, right? I'd get it for a second, and then it was gone. And God knew that. I believe that. And he brought me this amazing woman. So one day I'm in the gym, and this woman walks in, most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life. And I ran up to the front desk, and I gave her a tour. And I said, "Listen, if you join, I'll offer you a free personal training session." And she took it. And I remember thinking, man, this woman, she is way out of my league. And after she left, I called my dad, and I remember telling him, I said, "Dad, I just met my future wife." And my dad knew me. He knew me as a player. He knew me as, he's laughing, but he could hear it in my voice. Like, wow, like maybe there's something to this. And long story short, she comes back in the next day and she tells me she has a boyfriend. I thought, oh my gosh, maybe I didn't feel that. I don't know what that was. And so a couple of weeks later, she winds up asking me out. And I share this with you because, you know, my wife, and John knows my wife, Danielle, and she's as close to perfect as a person as you'll ever find. And I couldn't tell her when I first met her that I was in recovery. Here I am. I'm like 3 months sober. So I remember, I lied to her on numerous occasions. I told her I counsel guys in recovery. I never wanted to share anything with her. I remember one day riding home with her from St. Augustine, and I just felt this overwhelming guilt. And I said, "Listen, Danielle, I got something I got to share with you." And I remember looking over at her, and I said, I had tears in my eyes. I said, "Listen, I'm a homeless drug addict." I said, "I've done some horrible things in my life, things that I could never even share with you." I said, "You are way too good of a person for me and you deserve better. And I remember her looking back at me, and she said, Ben, that's not who you are today. And I love you regardless, and I will be there for you regardless. And I had never felt that before. I'd never felt that kind of love. And she showed that to me. And I really believe she's been such an integral part in my growth. And I'll share that as I go along in my story. But I'm working at this gym, and again, these blessings of God are coming to fruition. I'm working a program, and one day the local YMCA sent somebody to recruit me. And I told them, I said, listen, I have no intention on staying in Ocala. In fact, I think I wanted to move back to New York to be with my dad. And one day I'm driving by the Y, and I can feel like the presence of God on me. And I said, all right. So I pull in and I walk in the Y, and I just feel this peace come over me. And the lady that was recruiting me, she was standing at the front desk, and we walk in the back office, and she said, listen, she said, the YMCA is losing $500,000 a year. She said, we need someone like you to work for us. She goes, I can pay you $10 an hour. I'm going to need you to work like 60 hours a week. I can pay you for 40. But if things go well, we'll move you up. I thought, woman, you are absolutely crazy. This can't be God talking to me. There is no way I'm going backwards, because I had worked my way up as a personal trainer. I was doing much better than that. And so I remember going home to Danielle, who's my girlfriend at the time, and I share this with her. I said, Danielle, I really feel like I'm supposed to work at the Y. And I feel like God's leading me there, but there's no way I can't take this step back. We're new in our relationship. And she said, Ben, for once in your life, why don't you trust God? She goes, if you're supposed to go there, God will take care of you. Go there. So I went, and I worked, and I implemented all the systems I learned over the years running health clubs, and the Y became super successful. And the lady promised me, she said, listen, if I will take care of you. I remember that, right? That was the first thing she said to me when she recruited me. So the vice president from Orlando comes down, meets with her, gives her all the accolades, and promotes her to a YMCA in Orlando. I think, okay, well, now I'm going to get promoted to her position. He sits me down in an office, and he says, listen, he said, you're 25 years old. He said, you think you're, essentially, I don't remember how he said it, but I remember feeling like you think you're this little hot shot. You don't have the education to do this job. You've never worked with volunteers. He goes, you're great at what you do, but you need to stay doing what you're doing. And I remember thinking, you mother effer, right? Like, how dare you? Like, I've done all this. I deserve this. And now you're not going to give it to me. And I went home that night, and actually that day, this is how things work. That day, a guy walks in, and he saw what I did with the Y, and he owned an insurance company. And he said, Ben, he said, I want you to come work for me. He goes, I'm going to offer you $50,000 a year. I'll pay you commissions, and I guarantee you over the years, you'll move up and you'll do very well with me. And I thought, his name was Raymond. I said, Raymond, I said, I'm going to take that offer. I said, I do need to talk to my girlfriend about it, but that sounds great. And it happened the day that happened. And if you look at that instance, you might say, well, maybe that's God hanging this out for you, right? Like, this is what you're supposed to do. I'm opening the door. So I go home and share it with Danielle, and Danielle says, listen, Ben, you're not designed for that. God didn't do that. You're in the place you're supposed to be. She said, Ben, you've run from everything your whole life. Whenever anything doesn't go Ben's way, you're out. She goes, why don't you try something different for once? Why don't you prove to these people that you are the right man for the job? Go back and stick your nose to the grindstone and prove to them that you are the man. And I remember looking at her and going, I am not doing that. And she said, oh, yeah, you are. And I did. I went back in, and I started to visualize my name on the executive director nameplate. And I continued to work hard. I worked harder than I've ever worked before. I had a great attitude. They'd bring people in and interview them in front of me, and they, one after one, they just didn't make a decision. And it took several months. And eventually the Y continued to do well. And they thought, maybe there's something to this kid. We'll give him a shot. And they promoted me to executive director. 25 years old. I was the youngest executive director at the YMCA. And, at this time I started accumulating years in recovery. Eventually I moved up in the Y. I became a vice president, became the youngest vice president in the organization. And I tell people, listen, I am not a smart guy, but no one will ever outwork me. And I would put forth the work ethic, and I would just work my tail off. And people in recovery, it's amazing when we get sober what we can accomplish, right? And I remember at moments, my sponsor, it was after about 5 years of recovery, makes me pull this list out. And he goes, let's go through that list, Ben. He goes, all right, you have that $80,000 in hospital debt? I said, no, I don't. He said, and at this time, Danielle and I eventually get married. He goes, "You're married to Danielle, right?" "Yeah." He said, "You got a pretty good job." "Yeah." He said, "You got some pretty good relationships in the community." "Yeah." And then went and he said, "Let's list all the other things going on right now for you." And I had everything that I could have ever imagined in my life because of recovery. And I'd love to say that I stuck to recovery, but eventually my addiction became how successful I could become. And I became addicted to success. And the next goal, whenever I hit something, it was always what's next. And I kept moving up with the why. And eventually I was a vice president and I was driving to Orlando. And one day I just felt like this horrible anxiety come over me. And I remember talking to Danielle, and Danielle said, one of the things I like to do when I'm stressed is go on my boat. And we went out on my boat and we went to a place called Eaton's Beach. And while I was there, I ran into a business guy there. And he said, "Hey, Ben, man, you've done some awesome things with the YMCA. Would you ever want to open up a gym?" Well, I had just finished raising $5 million in our community to expand the local YMCA, working with community people. And I looked at him, and his name is Tom. I said, "Tom," I said, I've always wanted to own my own gym, but how do you think it would look with me opening a gym after I just raised all the money for the YMCA? I said, "There's no way I could do that." And he said, "If anything ever changes, let me know. I'd love to invest in a gym with you." He goes, "I know you would do great things." And that night I went home and I went to sleep. And in my sleep, God spoke to me and he said, "Ben, you're going to open a gym." And I remember over the years of raising money, I had all these amazing offers by very successful business people in the community trying to recruit me to run their businesses. And I would always bring it to my wife, who's like this guiding light. And I'd say, "Gosh, they want to pay me all this money to do this." And she'd say, "Ben, that's just not who you are. God didn't design you for that." And I remember waking up the next morning and I remember thinking, I'm really going to have to sell this to my wife about me opening this gym, but I really feel like I'm being called to it. And I share it with her and I'm so excited. And I said, "Babe, I really feel like God's leading me to do this." And she prays and she says, "God's leading you to do this." She goes, "You absolutely, this is what your plan is." So there was a local gym in our community that had been losing a ton of money. And I knew the guy that owned it. So I called him up and I said, "Bill," I said, "I'd love to meet with you and talk to you about your gym." So I go and meet with him and we walk in a back office. And I said, "Bill, would you ever want to sell this gym?" And he looks at me. And this is a guy who's a big guy like Johnny, who's a tough guy and like a business guy. And all of a sudden a tear comes down his face. And I said, "What did I say? I'm really sorry." And he said, "Ben, my wife and I were on our knees 2 days ago praying to God for an answer because we were shutting the gym down in 3 days." He goes, "Whatever you need to take this gym over, I will help you." And I said, "Wow." I said, "Yeah, I would love to." And here I am. I'm a vice president for the YMCA. I'm doing very well financially, making six figures. You think it's a nonprofit, they don't pay well. I'm making great money. I have 2 kids, one on the way, and I'm going to leave this job to take over a gym that's losing $40,000 a month and has a horrible culture and stigma attached to it. And all my business friends said, "Ben, please don't do it. It makes no sense. Please don't do it." But my wife said, "This is what we're going to do." And I believe this is what you meant. So I leave the Y and I take over this business. And I want to give you just a glimpse of what it was that we bought. Because if you know anything about my gym today, you see it and it's gorgeous. And Johnny will tell you. But I bought this business. And in the first night of being in there, it was like a prison yard. But it was so dark, you could hardly see across the floor. And 2 big guys get into a fight on the workout floor. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, please no." So I run out there, I break it up. And these guys are cursing at me. And they're like, "Who the F are you?" And I'm like, "I'm the owner." And I remember thinking, what the hell did I do buying this thing? And it was just that kind of environment. And I had no recovery in my life. Danielle and I had saved up a certain dollar amount that we were going to live off of. And we couldn't take any money from a losing business. And we went through our whole savings. And 9 months in, we have no money left. And I have bills on my counter. I'm not telling anybody. I'm not talking to I'm not going to meetings, and I'm letting all this stuff build up inside. And I'm in my office one day and I get a sharp pain in my chest, and somebody walks by the office and they see it and they call the ambulance and they rush me to the hospital. And I thought I had a heart attack. I was 35, 10 years sober at the time, but not working, no recovery in my life, not working a program. And while I'm there, the doctor says, "Listen, son, I don't know what's going on in your life, but," he says, "you're going to have to make a change." He goes, I don't think you can do this much longer." He said, I'm going to prescribe you some Xanax. And I think you definitely need to take that when you have these moments. So I remember going home that night and hitting my knees and crying to God and saying, God, why would you do this to me? I left a great career. I had so many good things going for me, and now I'm going to lose it all, and I wound up taking Xanax and I couldn't deal with it. Eventually I wound up picking up again. And then in that time, the gym actually started making money that month. See, God was always with me all along. I wanted to control it. Things got really tough. And we talked about this. Justin and I were talking about it earlier, is that if you look back on your life, I know for me, the hardest moments of my life is when the most growth came. And on the other side of it, there are so many miracles that happen. And God was getting ready to provide that miracle for me, but I had no recovery. So I wound up relapsing. And here I am, a brand new business. I have 3 kids, and my wife had never seen me use before. And I had 10 years sober. And I'm the type of drug addict and alcoholic that I'm wide open. I'm going back to where I stopped. So I pick up 2 bottles of wine and I'm pounding them, and I'm in a hotel room. My wife's calling me. She's not used to this. I'm home every night. And I see her phone number calling, and I remember just thinking, like, I can't answer this. I can't do it. And eventually I picked it up, and I said, I've picked up and I'm using. And she said, where are you? And she came and found me. And I told Danielle, I said, listen, if I ever relapse, you have to tell me, listen, either get help or get out, because I will burn it all down. And you deserve better than that. And she did. My wife is such a strong person. She walked in that hotel room that night and she said, listen, she says, you do what you got to do tonight. She goes, but when you come home tomorrow, she goes, you pack your stuff and you either get out or you either get help. And I went back that next day, and I decided to go to a 30-day program. And I remember thinking this, guys. I remember thinking that here I am, the business is making good money. It started making great money. Have a beautiful wife. I have great relationships in the community. I have all this stuff, and I'm miserable. I'm absolutely miserable. Like, I didn't want to live. And here I am, my wife with 3 kids is driving me to a treatment center, and I'm leaving her with my business. And it was miserable. And I remember going into that program and kind of having to refocus my recovery. And when I got out of there, I had to really focus in on how I was going to live my life in recovery. And it was not an easy road. I remember, and again, I think that John and I were talking about this when we first got on. You might not believe in God, but when you look back on your life, God has put people in your life. I believe God works through people, right? And he brings people like John into my business, who's in recovery, that can help me see things that I can't see, because I'm blind to all these spots in my life. And John was a great person to have on my team, and he would pull me in the office and he'd say, hey, you're kind of doing this. And I never would see it. And it would be a good wake-up call. And, one of the things that I realized as I started doing some work on myself is that I had all these horrible things happen to me as a kid. And I didn't share it early on, but I was sexually abused as a young child. I was beat. I was everything that could happen to a child that happened to me. And the way the mind works is like a computer program. You get these ruts in your mind, and they're there. And then those ruts is how you view the world. You have a lens of the world, right? So a lot of how I would act and how I would try to control situations is because of the fear of that. I wanted to control situations from all that I had been through in my life. And I had to do a lot of work on that and realize that, my thinking, it was no good. I heard something one time that 95% of our thoughts are the same as our previous day. 95%. And the only way that I can change that is by identifying those thoughts and having a conscious effort on who I want to be. So one of the things that I've realized is that I'm always acting out of fear. So if I'm acting out of fear, what's the opposite? It's how I have to start living my life in faith and start trusting that God has me. And I started doing a lot of work on myself. And, in my business, I would love to tell you that when I got back, I I ran it the right way, but I would push people really hard, and I was always very successful. My business became more successful than I could have ever imagined. And I remember at one point thinking, man, this thing is unbelievable, right? But every day when I go to work, the next day I'd say, okay, what's next? And I remember sitting down with one of my employees who I really care about. And she looked at me and with tears in her eyes, and she said, Ben, you tell people you care about them. Like you'll say that, but you don't show that. She said, and you don't trust anybody. And you'll never truly be successful if you continue to operate that way. And that stuck through me like a dagger in my heart. And I lost her as an employee, and she was someone that was super important to me. And I remember thinking, is this who you want to be? Like, do you want to be remembered for being someone who had a successful gym? Or do you want to be someone that really makes a difference in helping people become better? And my sponsor, we would always talk, and I know he's on right now. And he said, Ben, I can make life real simple for you. He goes, after all this BS that you talk about, he goes, if you would just wake up every day with two focuses, serving God and serving others, he goes, everything else would fall in place. And I would remember, and I'd try to justify everything to him. I'd say, Mike, but you just don't understand. And he'd say, Ben, how many times do I have to tell you? He said, man, if you would just get out of the way and serve God and serve others, everything else would fall in place. And it was like a broken record. Like my thick head, it would never get through to me. And I would sit in meetings and I'd see these guys with long-term recovery, and I'd see the peace that they'd have over them. And I'd go, they must be on something. There is no way that you can have that kind of peace. Because I know I couldn't. I thought I was different. Like this hamster wheel would never shut off. And man, as I started doing some work and seeing the benefits of recovery, like I was able to start shutting my mind down. And I was really starting to experience some joy and peace. And a lot of you, obviously everyone knows COVID hit in 2020. And if I didn't have recovery at that point in my life, I think very easily I could have picked back up. But I had a total peace about me as we went through this time. My business got shut down. We had no revenue coming in. We had $300,000 a month in expenses. We had to pay our employees. We had to pay our landlords. And the whole time I had a total peace about me. And it's because our circumstances don't have to dictate how we feel. Like we choose how we feel. We choose if we want to let those things to affect me. And before, when I talked about how I relapsed because I imploded, because I kept putting all that stuff in and not getting it out. This time when things were struggling, I was calling my sponsor. I was calling John. I was talking about it. You see, as guys, and I know there's girls on here, see, we don't want to talk about our stuff. We think we need to carry it on our shoulders and that we're strong if we keep this stuff in. In fact, that's how I was raised. Like you would not share your emotions. And if you did, you'd get punched in the face for it. But what I've learned today is that if you get to be courageous and to have strength is to be vulnerable and to share your true feelings and know your hurts. And when you get that stuff out is when you experience true freedom, right? And I was thinking, today in the last year, I've developed some amazing relationships with guys in the community. And I used to be the type of guy that I'd be in a conversation with you and I'd be thinking of an exit plan because I had so much anxiety. Like I would be thinking about what I was going to say or how the conversation was going to go. And I just wouldn't be present to hear you out. And today, when I talk to people, I really want to understand them. I really want to connect with them. And it's amazing. Like I used to think like people like were maybe stuck up or something, but it was me giving off this aura of how anxious I was. And now that I have this peace and I'm about really hearing you out, and it's about you and not what you can do for me. Like these people I'm attracting people in my life. And it's such a great feeling. It really is. And I think about my life today. I have guys in recovery. I got John, I got Mike, I got some really good guys in recovery. And I share this because I'm sure some of you guys on here are married. I got guys in my life that are great husbands that give me advice on how to be a great husband. I got guys in my life that I look at that have amazing character and they lead the community And I look at them and I go, that's who I want to be. And I put myself around those people. You see, going back, and I shared my college and my education, I look at my life today and I get so much more out of being around people that have wisdom and watching them and learning from them. And I position myself around people that I want to be like, and they rub off on me. And it's such a gift. It really is. And before I could never do that. Today I'm open to hearing, and I want to grow. And I have this friend named Harvey, and I've developed a relationship with him in this last year. And he's just a guy that I look up to in every way. And like when he sits down with me or he calls me, sometimes I'm like, I can't believe a guy like this, because he's super successful, is even friends with a guy like me today. Like, that's a miracle. And it's just the blessings of recovery. It really is. And, my life today, my business makes about a quarter of what it made 3 years ago. I have a lot of things going on in my life that were not as good as it was 3 years ago. But I'm so much more peaceful and happy today because of the life I live and how I serve God and how I serve others. And there's one other thing I want to share that really helped me tremendously. About a year ago, I would wake up in the morning and I'd start my day. And I'd hear people say, oh, you got to start your day in meditation or whatever. But I never really did that. And I watched this, somebody said, hey, watch this video on Miracle Morning. So I watched it, and it was all about how to start your day with meditation, journaling, right? In recovery, we talk a lot about that, prayer, and then visualizing who we want to be, because the mind is so powerful. So I had to visualize who I want to be. And I would do this in the morning, and slowly but surely, I'd start to experience some peace, and I'd start my day. And man, it really transformed me. So that's how I start my morning every morning. And one of the other things that I put on my thing is that I want to help someone every day now. I want to really help someone, and I ask God to put people in my life that I can help. And the days that I focus on serving others and not serving Ben, I feel awesome. When I get caught up in what can people do for me, I feel miserable. Like, the secret to life is really helping others. And a really cool story that happened a couple months ago is my mother, I just never really was able to forgive my mom, and I every time I'm around her, I would have an expectation of how she should act, and she'd go in and out of recovery, and I would say, oh man, she just said this or this, right? And one day God spoke to me and he said, why don't you go to seek to understand your mother for once? And I went to her house with that mindset, and I sat down with her and I said, Mom, I want to know you better. I want to know about you. I want to know what you've been through. And my mom sat across from me and shared her life story with me. And she talked about some really horrible things that happened to her as a kid and the things that she went through when she grew up. And she's crying. And I saw my mother from a different light that day. And that moment, what that moment taught me was that, Ben, you go into a lot of situations where you expect things from people, and you're constantly judging what people should do and how they should act. And if you would go into situations seeking to understand them, things would go a lot better. And over the last several months, that's really how I've been trying to live my life, is when things are not necessarily going away with people, going the way instead of going in with the accusing mind, I go in and say, hey, tell me what's going on. Share with me what's happening in your life. And with that perspective, it has just really changed my life. And I really think, like, when you look at our country today, I think that's one of the biggest problems we face, is that everybody has their own agenda that they want to pass, but we're not taking the time to seek to understand each other anymore. And this program is really amazing when you think about it. You know, how many people, there's so many people today that come across my life. I was thinking about this. I think about how many times in my life today, I've been through a lot of stuff. I've been through addiction. I didn't share, but there's been moments in my marriage. My wife and I have almost gotten divorced. I've almost lost my business. And I've been someone who lives in the turmoil of constant anxiety and fear in my mind. And I've been able to get on the other side of all of these things. Now, these are great lessons that I can now use to help others. And I believe that every one of us on this has a purpose, and our purpose is to use the things that we've been through in our life to serve others. And when we do that, we're living in God's purpose, and it's truly pure joy. So anyway, that's my story. Thanks for letting me share, guys.
Hey, thanks so much, Ben. That was an awesome story of hardships, man. Hardships. How to deal with when we had it on Perseverance the other day about this past Sunday on the topics for Sunday night, perseverance. When the what is it? When the tough when it going gets tough, the tough get going. And that's what it's all about. And I love how you said it's better to understand to be understood. That is so huge. And I agree with you on the whole, this world that we live in, this America. We could be so much better if we could just understand people and find out, get to the bottom of why. You know what I mean? There's a reason. And with your mom, dude, I'm the same way. Like my dad, dude, I had resentments up the yin yang towards him because how I was brought up. Like, dude, like, but then you have to understand, like, why? They did the best they could with what they had. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my dad was luckily he had 29 years in recovery, but it took a long time to actually mend the relationship between me and him because of the stuff that happened to him that he didn't work through. You know what I mean? And I got the brunt of it when he was using it. Just like my kids got the brunt of it when I was using,
Yeah.
Maybe a little different, but it's the same deal. So I think that's awesome. Johnny, you want to?
Yeah. Ben, I've heard your story before, man. I love it. And when you were speaking, it made me think about how awesome the stuff that we get to do today. Like you said, man, being around you, there's so many things that you touched on, especially you surround yourself with people. That's what I did with you guys when I first came around. I was awkward. You were a business owner. I was a guy who'd been to prison a couple times. I had no clue who I was, but I knew by that time that if I surrounded myself, because people told me, and just like you said, they were right the whole time. We didn't want to listen.
Right.
But I knew that much, and eventually it did. It started to rub off on me, and I was able to serve others. And I learned that stuff through guys like you and Steve, and beyond my wildest dreams. Just like your 5-year plan. You guys were at my wedding. It was just like my life exploded when I started to do the recovery and I surrounded myself with greatness. My life became great, and it became even greater when I started to serve God and other people.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you're in my life as a mentor, as a friend, and you're awesome, brother. Really. We have a hell of another journey ahead of us moving forward, and we're lucky the stuff we get to do, man. Like, just to share with you guys, Ben will call me. Well, I'll have somebody reach out to me or somebody will reach out to him. And we're in a position today where we get to help people get into treatment centers and get into detoxes and, that, like you said, when I'm doing that stuff, I have no worries in the world. I feel whole. That's my purpose, right? But when I'm stuck up here in this thing, worried about what's the next thing that I can get, I'm freaking miserable, man, And thank God along this journey, we learn these things and, I can either quickly fish myself out of it or I'm surrounded by people who can see, and I'm grateful for that, man. So I love you, Ben.
I love you too.
Why don't you read some comments? I see them pumping on the screen.
Yeah. So I'll read a few of them. We got Marty says, need to start my recovery journey and be vulnerable and just talk to someone about what's going on. And that's the truth. It's just getting out of this thing even for that moment. Stop us from doing the dumb shit. That's pretty much what it's all about. We telling ourselves we're our biggest snitch when it comes to recovery.
Yeah.
And then we got Carrie says, to have strength to be vulnerable. Boom. Thank you, Ben. Way to go. What an amazing story of experience, strength, and hope. We have
that's Steve.
Steve. Okay. I was like,
Steve.
I don't know how to pronounce that.
Go Hagen.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. If we see ourselves as the smartest person in the room, maybe we're in the wrong room. That is true.
Yeah.
And then we got Catherine says, great story. 31 days clean today. Congratulations. 31 days. That's awesome. We got Carrie again. 11-step prayer helped me to understand them to be understood. Donna says, good stuff. What's up, Donna? And we got Virna. I hope I said that right. Verna. There you go. Thank you for sharing your story, Ben. Pam says, thank you. Makes me realize I'm doing what God wants me to do. We got Terry says, thank you for sharing. I have a 40-year-old son in active addiction. Mike says, well done, sir. Love you. We got Marty says, thanks for sharing, Ben. We got Steve. Thanks, Ben. Now I know who it is. Yeah. Won't mess that up again. Sorry, Steve. You're an asset to our community. And Steve, again, Johnny, those lights are gangster.
Those lights.
They are. And Donna's been awesome. Catherine? All right. Well, thanks again, Ben, so much for sharing your story, man. We appreciate you being on here. We will definitely be, hopefully I'll be able to meet you in face-to-face here shortly so we can have conversations, you know, to help us in our future endeavors. And guys, this Sunday, we have an event. We have the gratitude meeting, gratitude gathering. All right. We have a gratitude gathering right after Thanksgiving to express our gratitude because, you know, Thanksgiving is the season of giving thanks for all in our lives, especially, you know, what we've done with our recovery, with family, with restoring families, all of it, you know, and what better way to end an amazing weekend of Thanksgiving by sharing it with everyone, you know. So we're going to have a Zoom meeting. I'm going to have the link in the event. The event is at the top of our page, pinned to the top. Just click going, find the Zoom link, join us this Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and let's share our gratitude with each other. Our gratitude is the loudest when we share it with others, and that is so true.
And it'll be the first time in Hope Shot history that people out, you know, in, you know, live land will be able to join us and come on and speak for themselves and be on Zoom with us.
Yeah. So come spend some Thanksgiving cheer with us, and we're going to make this a big event, and who knows, man, it might turn into something. I don't know, but it's going to be fun, and I'm going to enjoy it. So, but thank you guys. I love you all.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks, guys. Love you too, man.
See you guys.